Good evening, everyone. My name is Thomas Gallagher, and I'd like to welcome you to our third and final version of this year's Irish Pig Health webinars. The topic of this evening's webinar is Wean well, and we have two very interesting speakers with us this evening who will give presentations. They're both farmers. Our first presentation is from Ciaran Sheehan. Ciaran farms alongside his father in County Cork, and he'll talk to us about their own farm experience of removing zinc oxide from their pig weaner diet. Our second speaker is Gallie. Roy is from County Kildare, and he farms 180 sows, and he is going to talk about his experience of removing antibiotics and zinc from his pig production system. So the format of this evening's meeting will be the two presentations. Ciaran will go first, Ciaran Sheehan, and then we'll have Roy, and we'll have a Q&A session afterwards moderated by Teagasc's Ciaran Carroll. So without further ado, we will kick off the meeting, and we'll like to welcome Ciaran to this evening's meeting.
Hello, my name is Ciaran Sheehan, and today I'm actually going to be talking to you about our on-farm experience with the removal of zinc oxide from the pig weaner diet. So our farm background, we're actually a dual enterprise of dairy and pigs. So as you can see in the picture there, we have the dairy farm, all based around where the solar panels are and all the sheds, and then beside that then we have the mill and the piggery, the big tall buildings, and then beside that there is a shed for the biofuel, which is basically a wood chip. It's a wood chip boiler. So we're an integrated pig unit. In 2020, we actually sold 27.5 pigs per sow, and we in the mill, as you can see, we produce all the feed or we produce all the feed from the home mill. So from raw materials, so basically we get in ground soya, ground barley, or we ground soya, barley, wheat, and maize. And if you see the big tall shed in the back, those are covered. That shed covers all the bins. We also get in then delivered minerals and soya oil, and these are all mixed up in our mixed tank. So we have two feed systems. We have a shower feed system which feeds the replacement gilts and the weaners, and then we have a big Dutchman system which feeds the sows and it feeds the finishing pigs. We actually are positive for PRRS, ileitis, influenza, PCV, and mycoplasma. So some of the reasons for the removal of zinc oxide. In 2014, we actually recognised that there would be a ban down the line for the use of zinc oxide on pig farms. Now, we did not know when this ban would come in place. So the farm management actually decided that we'd have to do something to be ready for the ban, because at the time we didn't actually know when the ban would come into place. So at the time, there was not much information known about the removal of zinc oxide from weaner pig diets at the time. So there was not much experimental data or anything about products about it, or anything to help remove zinc oxide from weaner pig diets. So in September 2016, complete removal of zinc oxide from the weaner pig diet began. So some of the reasons for removing zinc oxide. We started early actually, just to give us the time to allow the farm to experiment. An action plan was actually put in place to help reduce the reliance of antibiotics on farm. This was actually in consideration with the improvement of pig health, and also lower protein diets and other things like that. So the question was also asked, would there be a potential to improve pig gut health with the removal of zinc oxide? No, I can't answer that question to you either. So at the time, how much zinc oxide were we using? So prior to 2016, zinc oxide was included in the weaner diet, and this was fed to wee pigs for the first 2 weeks, and this was fed at a prescribed rate of 3 kilos per tonne. This is kind of typical to all either Irish farms that were using zinc at the time and are using zinc currently or prior to now. So the removal process, the duration in time and how long it took to come through. So prior to 2016, between 2014 and 2016, there was a process where we questioned if zinc oxide could be included in the pig diet at a lower rate of 1 kilo per tonne. We questioned the department, and eventually by 2016, mid-2016, we kind of figured out that this wouldn't be allowed, and that it was either basically an all or nothing approach. So the removal process began with the help of both the vet and nutritionists, and we used them both as a team. So we sat them down both together, and an action plan was put in place so that both the vet and nutritionist could agree on. So it took about 4 months to get things right, and with lots of adjustments in the first 4 months with diet and supplements. So because in the first 4 months, there was higher mortalities, higher antibiotic usage, and the diet was made low on high protein. But we initially started with mid-protein diets, and we eventually figured out that low protein diets worked best for us. And certain supplements, we tried many supplements, and eventually we found one that actually worked quite well for us. But this actually doesn't. We can't say much about it for other pig farms or represent other pig farms about it. So do we go back putting zinc in the diet in 2016? And we haven't actually. We haven't put any zinc in the diet since 2016. So there's some factors that actually worked on our farm for the removal of the process of zinc oxide. So lower protein diets actually work for us, but this was a combination of talking to the vet and the nutritionist. So at the time, a plan was actually put in place, but this plan actually couldn't be set in stone because it had to be changed a couple of times because something could go wrong. The wean pigs start to scour, or there could be other problems just like that, or increased meningitis or something like that. So this plan actually had to change a couple of times throughout the year, and this could nearly change up to 3 times a year, and you'd have to go back to the start. Pigs were weaned at an older age of an average of 34 days. So pigs actually on farm at the moment, according to pig-sized figures and pig champ figures, pigs are weaned at an average between 34 to 36 days in the last 3 years, or 4 years or 5 years since 2016. And antibiotic usage actually increased initially in 2016, but over time this reduced. The reason why antibiotic usage increased was because we had increased scour, and we had to find ways to combat this, and pigs are falling back, and we had to find ways to combat the falling back pigs. And also usage decreased by introducing vaccination programs and managing the diet. So antimicrobial resistance or antimicrobial usage actually decreased by introducing many vaccination programs and managing the diet, so lower protein diets. Other factors that worked on farm for us are the use of a product, but this was successful for us, but no research is done, and there are many other products out there that claim that it will supplement or be a substitute to zinc oxide, but there's not much research done on these products, so we can't be fully relied on. Also, all in, all out, there was no pigs move backwards from batch to batch, and we euthanized any bad pigs. So any pigs that were falling backwards were euthanized, and a thorough hot wash was done after each batch was moved. So after each weaner batch was moved, a hot wash took place inside the house. So some downsides to leaving out zinc oxide are we have slightly less growth in stage 1 weaners. Now, we recently integrated stage 1 and stage 2, and we can't really comment on the growth of stage 1 weaners at the moment because it's a complete integrated stage. Can get looseness in the weaners between days 5 and 8 after weaning. So like we see when you wean 5 days, usually we wean on a Monday, and Friday we would see a small bit of looseness. Between Friday to Monday, the looseness would kind of dry up, but this is recently being challenged on the farm since Christmas. And as I said earlier on, this is because we've actually moved from a 2-stage weaner to a 1-stage weaner. And this also could be with there's also a multitude of factors. So it could be an ileitis problem, or it could actually be protein too high in the diet. So we're actually looking to figure out what or to combat this problem by we're actually going to see if the ileitis vaccine works for us. And protein actually could be too high in the diet. So we're actually considering lowering the protein in diet. So some advantages to removing zinc oxide. We actually didn't really notice any advantages from removing zinc oxide. The only advantage is the preparation for the ban of removal of zinc oxide. There's also a question around the environmental advantage. Is it an advantage? The usage was so low, it was just used in the first 2 weeks in weaners and it was used at 3 kilos a ton, but it was only fed to the first two weeks in weaners, and you question if this really has such an environmental impact. So some cost implications of the removal of zinc oxide and decreased antimicrobial usage. So overall, the increase in healthcare costs, there was an increase in healthcare costs due to increased vaccinations. So more vaccinations and more costs and reduced reliance on antibiotics. But vaccinations cost more than antibiotics do. Initially, there were higher mortalities, so increased overall production costs, but after 4 months, the weaning mortality stabilized. I suppose in comparison, we have a lower weaning mortality rate now in comparison to 2014, 15, and 16. So the average in 2014, 15, and 16 was actually 3.5%, whereas now actually our weaning mortality for the average last 3 years has been 2.5%. But actually this cannot be just put down to the multitude factors such as zinc oxide removal or this can, like other factors that can influence this. This could be just our hot washing or after each batch. This could be factors such as lower protein diets or vaccination plans. It's not just due to zinc oxide removal. So some recommendations I have, and from the farm here at home we have, is that more research is actually needed on the alternative products that are used and are available on the market, and to actually see how they work on other farms and how they work on disease challenged herds. Another recommendation I would have for a lot of farmers are maybe lower protein diets in the weaning stage. Hot washing and hot pulses after the end of batch is also a decent recommendation. And another recommendation is all in, all out. So basically, no pigs are moved backwards. Yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask myself or my father. So, Eugene. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Ciaran. That was a very informative talk, and we look forward to the Q&A session. Just for a matter of format for the actual Q&A session will take place after our second speaker, Roy Gallie's talk, just to give a bit of equal balance to the two speakers. So our second speaker this evening is Roy Gallie, and Roy is going to talk to us about his experience of removing antibiotics and zinc from his pig production system. So earlier this week we caught up with Roy and we learned firsthand of how he achieved this. So I'll pass you over to Roy.
Able to share with you some of my thoughts on the removal of both antibiotics and zinc from my pig rations and from my pigs on the farm. So I'm going to start with a few pictures that will keep you give you an insight into how my little farm runs here. So I'm just going to go through to slideshow here, and see how we get on. So this is my farm, an aerial shot of the farm. I grow all my own, we have 180 sows in North Kildare, and I grow all my own wheat and barley. And I run a mill and mix plant as well. So the first few shots are sort of farmy shots. Here's some of the wheat being harvested. And then there's the next one is halfway through on the evening time, my farm staff, that's Ollie and Eric and Eric's family, very much part of the farm here, and an integral part and very valued part of any farm are the farm staff. We dry all our own grain on site and store it. And here's the dryer working, Ollie filling the dryer here last year. So my mill is somewhat unusual in that it's in a very old part of the farm, a stone-built shed that has been milling for animals for the last 200 years. There's still pitch pine beams in the ceiling, and it's sort of migrated from a mill wheel to a donkey going around in a circle to now a computer running a mill feeding a couple of thousand animals. In the 1980s, or we'll go on to the next one, then not only does it the mill, but then there's a new computerized wet mix as well in the next door room. And this has been working since 1987, feeding pigs on a non-stop basis ever since. So it doesn't owe us a whole lot at this stage. We are sort of an old farmyard, and therefore I've got pigs in all sorts of corners and have some stuff carted around in bags. Some stuff is all bulk and popped into bins and fed with a computer. So we have numerous different feeding regimes on the farm all at the same time. This is my link ration, which we can bag off, so we can trolley off straight away off the mixer. And we're more about that in a while. Okay. So I destocked the pig unit in the 1980s and restocked with disease-free stock in pig gilts, and I've remained pneumonia-free ever since. I suppose the principle of isolation in the middle of my own farm with no other pigs nearby has stood to me. I've always been interested in disease freedom and in minimizing the use of antibiotics. But over the years, we would get a flu or some post-weaning scouring. So CTC was included in the creep diets. And then that was followed by and without really evaluating it, they just stayed there. In our second stage weaners, which was a converted building with not exactly ideal conditions, ileitis was a constant battle. I never really got on top of it with either vaccines or diet change or the inclusion of feed additives that claimed to make a difference, even to herbs from India that smelt like one of those spice markets in Calcutta or Mumbai. So to move on to more recent times and the impending ban on in-feed antibiotics and zinc oxide, which was flagged a number of years ago and sparked my interest. I'm fairly sure that it was at a Pig Health Society symposium that the whole subject of the gut biome was mentioned. And in time, I made the decision to remove antibiotics as a matter of principle before it became mandatory, realizing the dangers posed to all of us of antimicrobial resistance and the emergence of the MRSAs in our hospitals. So I debated the idea with my nutritionist and vet and decided, rightly or wrongly, that an enormous leap of faith was going to be required. And to help us control all the inputs should be as much in our own hands as possible. So we moved the creep and the link diets. Up until then had been purchased, but we moved in the leap of faith, if you like, to making our own creep and links, removing all antibiotics, but keeping zinc at 3 kilos per ton for the time being. This was just in case. The creep, as you can see in the diagram here, is a 50% premix added to barley, wheat, and full fat soya, followed by the link of a 40% premix added to barley, wheat, and hyper soya. It must be good because the first thing we noticed was a considerable increase in intake in both the farrowing house and first stage weaners. This I put down to the increased palatability of the diets. You can see from the slide here all the ingredients and the percentages and the costs. The cost being 921 for my creep, and that's giving myself a 25 quid milling charge and 652 for the link. And then my weaner diet comes in at 390. Just to put another few figures in that case onto the screen while we have this screen up, our weaner mortality from the last Teagasc figures is 2.2. The weaning to sale, which is probably a fairly good one to go by because it takes everything into account, is intake is 1,903 grams. Daily growth rate is 757 and food conversion of 2.52. Nothing startling there, but all I'm quite happy with. So let's move on to the next bit then. So I'll try and get on to the next slide if I can. Where were we now? Now, anyhow, yes, it wasn't very long until the menace of strep suis reared its ugly head and became quite a problem, with swollen joints and meningitis filling the hospital pens to capacity. Sorry, I'm just going to put in this slide here now. I should have actually done this one earlier on there. It's just sort of a nice shot of the farm during wintertime. I suppose this was a realization that I know when everyone says you should be outdoor pigs and should be doing this and should be doing that. And I know during the wintertime, I was very happy to be inside a nice warm piggery when scenes like this were outside. And I know my pigs were as well. So I think it's really important that we keep pigs indoors in Ireland. And that it will be remaining, I'm quite sure, for some considerable time. Here's Eric bringing some sows out of the farrowing house, ready up for the boars. Okay, this is my little piggery here, in which I just go back to the strep suis then. So the strep suis began to appear, and I after a while it got really quite bad, and I was sorely tempted to go back to antibiotics, but persuaded myself to persist to see if immunity would develop. And sure enough, that's exactly what did happen. And over a period of several months, the storm abated and the incidences of sick pigs got less and less, proving to me that without antibiotics, we would get disease pressures, but the principle of herd immunity did work. Costly in mortality it was for a time, but over time, there was a diminishing of the problem, even without a change in management. An improvement in management practices could only help. And I can share with you some of the major, sorry, what's happening here? My slides are all coming back to me here now. What's happened there? Oh, sorry. The improvement in management can only help. So all I'm going to do is share with you some of them, and I hope that it will give you the confidence to make that leap of faith. I suppose attention to management of the piglet and the newly weaned pig is critical. And the first piece of advice I can give is to wean a strong piglet, one that's already fully eating creep, supplementing its mother's milk. And this, of course, means having enough farrowing pens to allow for a 5-week rearing cycle. I remember back when I started with my father here, we had 6-week weaning was quite normal. Once you have enough farrowing pens, you can play around at weaning, either taking 1 or 2 of the strongest pigs off at 4 weeks, or leaving the very smallest behind at 5 weeks on a cull sow so that all pigs weaned are eating creep in large quantities and nobody's missing out. And my farrowing pens are all half solid flooring. So one of the things that's really good for making sure that pigs are eating creep is to introduce a handful of it at 7 days onwards. And this is easy done with floor feeding. And this is the best place that they can get a hold of it. Little and often is the best and is the trick, so that it's always fresh and novel. Ad libitum, but never overfeeding, would be the objective. Last Thursday, I weaned a batch of my pigs and I weighed a batch of them, and they came in at just over 10 kilos each. And they haven't stopped growing ever since. Weaning is much less stressful because they are already on solid food and their guts are much more developed. So the second thing then is nutrition. And I think we just really need to concentrate on the creep and the link rations with no antibiotic to kill off all the good bacteria of the gut. So we now can use a gut enhancer in the creep and the link that contains probiotics, prebiotics to encourage the growth of lactic acid bacteria, short chain fatty acids and other nutrients to help the gut lining and increase the protective layer of the gut wall. and the inclusion of an acid blend to reduce the pH of the contents of the stomach. Acid being the first line of defense against pathogenic bacteria. The protein we reduced from the old creeps by 2 to 3%, and it is from highly digestible sources, avoiding soybean meal in the creep, but introducing it in the link. This is a copy of my creep, a little photograph of the creep ration in the trolley. Nothing startling there, but it's I can assure you very palatable and very tasty for the pigs, and they love it. These are some of the pigs that we left behind last week on 2 sows, 9 or 10 each, just to give them another week to make sure that they're bang up to grub, and I can assure you they are doing just that as I speak to you. Management, I suppose the attention to detail. These are the pigs that we weighed just coming off the sow at 10 kilos, some 4 weeks, some 5 weeks, most of them 5 weeks. So the thirdly is management, attention to detail, and here you see the washed out first stage weaner. I don't use, I better go back to my script here. Attention to detail gives the difference between the success and failure. Creep is used to inoculate the piglet with its nutrients, and it will consume post-weaning to ensure that at weaning, the pig has developed the enzymes required to digest the starch, vegetable proteins and fats in the ration. Needless to say, the very same creep is fed the week before weaning as the week after weaning. And I ensure plenty of feeder space here. I found the round turkey feeders are perfect, where even more timid pigs have no problem getting grub. As little difference between the farrowing house and the first stage weaner as possible is much the best to minimize the weaning trauma. So floor feeding also in the first stage weaner, and the drinkers are the same, everything is just the same, so there's no big deal about moving from farrowing house to first stage weaner house. Mats can be used, yes, I say and the added benefit of a mat to put your creep onto is that there's another bit of heat there, about 5 degrees they reckon worth of heat in a mat just sitting on the slat floor. Water is equally critical, so we have extra water bowls for 4 or 5 days post weaning, all helping to reduce the fasting period between weaning and their first meal, with acidification being beneficial for a pH of 3.8 to 4.2. Lots of light, so pigs can feed and find the feed and water easily at whatever time they fancy going for it. I do find that some pigs may get loose dung for a period, but this disappears in a few days. So when they move to second stage, there's little or no looseness to be seen. All in, all out, and a good wash and dry between batches is a given. But I do not use disinfectants, contrary to my internal biosecurity audit recommendation. Do I need it? I maintain not, unless I've got a problem, say like greasy pig disease. Like antibiotics, I prefer to stay away from chemicals where I can, with a whitewash being my first port of call for disinfection. So that was move 1, was to move away from antibiotics, and move 2 was to take zinc oxide out. And again, there was an increase in intake, which I put down to even greater palatability. And a little more looseness in the first stage, but not overly worrisome again, and without any decrease in growth rate whatsoever. In fact, where once I thought I would need an extra room for first stage with poor weight gain, well, what I thought was normal weight gain at the time, but now I know it was poor, I am now struggling with space the weekend before they move to second stage, because the growth rate is so high that the pens are jammers. So the move to zinc went seamlessly. And what's more, the cream on the cake for me in removing antibiotics and the gut sterilant, that is zinc. My pig's gut biome has been allowed to grow undisturbed, and at long last, my ileitis has all but disappeared in the second stage weaners. If I had enough time to wash between every batch, which is hard to get sometimes, I think the last vestiges would disappear too. The process of moving to antibiotic freedom is not without its hiccups, mind you, and strep continues to be a problem on and off. It tends to go in waves, but the interval between the waves is getting greater. At present, I have just come through a wave of erysipelas in some of the fattener pens. Whether this sudden emergence of a disease that has never caused us problems before can be put down to the removal of antibiotics, poor efficacy of vaccines, or poor hygiene, or slightly different strain of disease, I cannot tell. There will be an increase in mortality on pig farms, I have no doubt, but the transition has not been as bad as I had feared. And I'm still here to tell the tale. So that is a very much of a plus on my side. So just for a minute there to put my IFA hat on, we now need to secure an income stream from the marketplace to reimburse us with a pig price that will allow profitable pig production under all these new rules and regulations. This we will endeavour to do, but as you know, with internal trade deals that have meat as part of the commodities traded, with countries who have standards different than ours, I'm not so optimistic that this is going to happen. The Chinese are in charge of the pig market globally, and this will likely be the short-term future. In time, they will move from deficit to self-sufficiency to exporting. With multi-story piggeries, as we saw on the very first day of these webinars, this may not be in the too distant future. So we need to ensure that our high production standards are protected and a return to us, the pig farmers, for using them. This photograph just shows my first foray into loose farrowing, the sow that needed a bit of extra TLC, and I luckily had an old pen on the farm. And as you can see, all pigs are very happy. But I have to say, I wouldn't like to be doing them all like this. Thank you very much for listening. And thank you very much for listening. And as a former president of this society, can I congratulate the committee on their 3-day virtual webinar this year. I do, however, hope and look forward to next year and a real one where we can exchange our views face to face and enjoy the company that this symposium facilitates each year. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks very much there, Roy. I must say that was a very interesting presentation, and it's not too often you see a farm as vertically integrated as your very own. So I see we've got some questions there. So what I might do is I might pass it over to our to Ciaran Carroll, our moderator, to maybe kick things off on the questions front. So Ciaran.
Perfect. Thanks, Thomas, and thanks to the IPHS for the invite to facilitate the Q&A here tonight. I think you'll all agree, 2 excellent presentations from Ciaran and Roy, and we're joined by Ciaran and Eugene, his dad, and Roy now for the Q&A. So I've just gone into the ones that are there, and I'll go through them in order, I suppose, of what's coming through. There's plenty of questions coming through. Question for Ciaran and Eugene on the hot washing. I suppose first one would be, what are the advantages of hot washing over cold washing as far as you're concerned? And then, do staff find it hard to see how clean rooms are if there's steam rising from hot washing? And does using hot water create wear and tear on the pressure washer? So it's kind of 3 parts: the advantages of it over cold, how do staff find it, and is there wear and tear on the pressure washer?
No, there's no wear and tear any more wear on the pressure washer than you get from any other washer. You get a much cleaner wash from hot water because it removes all the fat and the film that you can't see with a cold washer. So you get a way better clean, and you don't need to use as much disinfectant if you're hot washing. When your lads are washing, we turn the minimum vent up to 100%. So basically that helps to get rid of all the steam.
Very good. Next question coming up there. What was the level of crude protein in the creep and link? I suppose before and after the removal. So we'll throw that one to Eugene and Ciaran first, and then we might get Roy's input. So the crude protein levels before and then after the change.
Before we started this, we were buying the creep and the link, and the protein was 20 to 21%. Today, the link protein is 14.2 and the weaner protein is 13.9%.
Okay, Roy?
I haven't gone quite that low. I just concentrate on the two, the creep and the link. So we used to be around the 20% in around when we used to buy it before we went into antibiotic freedom. So the present ones, both the and the creep, are in around the 18% protein at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Roy. The next one up is a question. I think you briefly touched on it, Roy, so I'll throw it at you. As regards strepto infections, you did encounter them? How did you overcome them?
Oh yes, they were horrendous. The first thing that happened was we had a whole lot of pigs in the piggy boxes they got swollen joints. That was the first one, and that took quite a bit of a treatment with amoxicillin. Definitely did it. Do you know what I mean? But it was tough on the pigs, and you would see it right through their lives, these little swollen joints. So it went on and on. Then we got the meningitis as well. So there was a sort of storm of meningitis, and you'd have 3 or 4 pigs a week with it, which is tough, as you know, to cure, and it leaves them with scars for the rest of their lives as well. Apart from the ones that you have to put down as well and euthanize. So we went through I suppose mortality would have jumped by up to the 5 or 6 or 7%, if not in around that, I would think, while these storms were going on. But you were on the ball all the time looking for signs of any sort whatsoever. So they're just horrible things to have. But when you take out antibiotics, then that means that these bacteria are going to get going, and the immune system of the pig has to respond to the increased level of threat, and that's what it did.
Okay.
It took over.
Very good. Thanks, Roy. Yeah, just one for Eugene there. Just looking for clarification on the withdrawal of zinc oxide on your farm. Was it a complete sudden stop in the withdrawal, or were you able to do any sort of a phased reduction from what was prescribed, or how did you take the zinc oxide out of the diets?
When we started this, we wanted to do a phased reduction, but at that time the department would only allow 3 kilos per ton of zinc, so we couldn't do a phased reduction. So it's all or nothing. All
or nothing, so straight withdrawal. And
yeah,
you mentioned, or Ciaran mentioned there on the thing that it took a few months to get over the hurdle, the initial problems that you encountered. What were the main problems you encountered, and what did you do about them?
Basically, pigs with diarrhea, pigs falling back, and was basically what the big problem at that point in time, because the protein was wrong in the diet. It took a lot of adjustment. We had to bring the vet and nutritionists on board big time to get this sorted.
Okay. And Roy, the same question more or less to yourself. Eugene and Ciaran both mentioned that they had the problems, took a while to get used to. How about yourselves? What were the main issues you encountered?
Yeah,
exactly, you've covered some of them.
Same problems. Pigs getting used to the fact that they had to cope with themselves, if you like. So there was scouring, but over time that diminished as they seemed to get the balance right, if you like, within themselves. So I didn't find too many problems, if you like, in that regard. Not too many problems. But I must say, I'm not typical farm because I haven't got pneumonia in it, and I know if you've got pneumonia and let's say PRS on top of that again, that's an immunosuppressant. That's when you start to get problems. So Ciaran and Eugene would much more likely run into more problems than I would, because I'm free of pneumonia.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that the disease burden, or whatever that is on a given unit, is going to determine how successful or how easy it is to transition to not having zinc oxide or reducing your antimicrobial usage on the farm. You mentioned, Roy, about your diets, that once you went to the home milling of the creeps and the links, that you noticed a big increase, and you had 50%, I think, premix in your creep and 40% in your link. Were there any wonder products in there, or anything in specific that that led to the increase?
You'll have to ask the fella who made them. It was Alton Keady in Cargill that I did this all through. So I'm afraid they have to be trade secrets at this stage. I'm not
That's
quite
fair enough. Well, you've given his name, so he can expect the phone calls tonight or tomorrow, if not tonight.
Exactly.
That's perfect. Thanks a million. Again, just for both of you, you both have increased your weaning age, and I think that's something we're seeing more and more farms doing. And it's going to be part of the answer. It's a multitude of answers, I'm sure. you're roughly out at nearly 5 weeks farrowing, or in the farrowing phase, I suppose, in the lactation phase. What have you seen in terms of increased weaner weights? Roy, if you want to start first, you know, you said 10 kilos there. Are they consistently 10?
Yeah, consistently 10. In fact, the pig will tell you when it's ready to be weaned. So I allow the pig to tell me when it wants to be weaned, as opposed to me telling the pig when it's going to be weaned. So yes, I will allow them to go to 10 kilos, and if they're not sort of up nice heavy weights, I'll leave them behind for a week on a sow, a little batch. So I would leave the small ones behind, and but definitely, of course, you've got to balance out the damage to the sow as well, because that's why I say when at 4 weeks you've got a couple of big fellas, and I have the pure, mine nearly all purebreds, so there can be a bit of variation because the teats aren't all producing exactly the same amount of milk. So I'd have a couple of big ones, I'd take them off and leave the small ones on for the week. So because there's definitely, you know, risk to damage the sow's teats if you leave them on for too long when they're getting hungry. But that's all part of the management. It's all part of management. Yeah.
Eugene, Ciaran, you saw similar increases in weaning weights. So what sort of weaning weights are you achieving now from where you were?
The average weaning weight now for the whole lot of pigs is 8.9 kilos.
8.9. So good, strong pigs. Yeah.
Yes.
You can see that that's half the battle. There's a question here on energy levels. You talked about reducing the protein levels. Were the energy levels in the diets changed anyway, reduced, or otherwise?
Not a lot. A little improvement in the energy, not a lot.
Okay. Likewise. Left the same.
Okay. And acid in the water. I think, Roy, you referred to acidification there. Have you that? Is that in the water all the time, or is it just? Well,
actually, I'm not actually doing that. That was given to me on advice, if you like to say that acidification is beneficial. I actually am waiting to reset up my water in my first stage weaner, and I will be putting acid in. So I have no particular product, but I do know it's beneficial, and that's where we're heading. But I don't do it yet, but I will be. Okay,
Eugene, have you tried it or?
Yeah, we were doing some acid in the water, but not anymore because it was very corrosive. So the water fittings in our feed system.
Right. Yeah. You can see that being an issue as well. Another one for Eugene and Ciaran here on the move from first and second stage to one stage. Why did you do that?
Less work, and less moving your pigs.
Yeah, I think that sums it up. I mean, we're kind of nearly unique in Ireland in that we're one of the few countries now that would have distinct first and second stage weaner accommodations, and labour has to be one of the big ones for sure, without a doubt. What's next here? And just scrolling through, sow condition when weaning at 5 weeks, is that an issue for either of you?
No, not an issue. Once you've got the appetite and the sows are eating plenty, I haven't had a problem. No.
And the same here, Ciaran. Once we are the same way, we don't have a problem.
Good. One here then asking about, do we think these changes could be implemented on a 2,000 sow farm? No name attached, but
of course. But it would take a lot of work. It would take a lot of work, but of course.
I agree. It does take a lot of work. I agree with Eugene there. You know, it is attention to detail. It's attention to management. And as one chap said to me, he says, you can do all the things you want everywhere, but if you the most important thing is the management. You need to get it right and keep it right.
I think that's it, the management and the staff. And, you know, getting your vet and nutritionist, I think you'd both agree that's very important to have them all in part of the plan and the overall review before you even start this project or start a project such as this, that you would pull in your vet, your nutritionist, your advisor, so that you're all singing off the one page and to develop a proper plan for the herd. Agreed?
But the time is running out, if you like. You know, this is all meant to be, they're meant to be removing it by the end of January next year, if I'm not far wrong.
Okay, yeah.
So that's the sort of, you know, we want to be moving, if you like, even trying it out while you can go back. Yeah, you want to be getting stuff in place.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I mean, we have a number of projects ongoing in Moore Park looking at that, and hopefully we'll have results before year end. There's about, I think, 6 or 7 different projects on the go at the moment, looking at all different from nutritional and management strategies around weaning time and post weaning, following the pig right through, looking at that whole area and the gut and what we can do to improve the you talked about the gut biome or the microbiome, what we can do to improve that for the pig, because that's going to be a big part of the story when we do. Question here, what sort of rest time have you after washing between batches? I suppose the key there is about drying. Maybe they didn't mention drying, but how long between washing and new batches coming into the system?
Yeah, I'll take that one first then. So yeah, we would move on a Tuesday and wash, and it'd be left to dry on Wednesday for filling on Thursday. Now, ideally, I would like to be selling a day earlier, but the factory won't take them. If they took them on a Monday, that would give me an extra day. So I'd love to see 2 days drying in between, because I think the drying is critical.
Mm-hmm. Eugene, anything to add to that?
For us, Ciaran, we sell a Wednesday, so basically we move out the pigs a Wednesday. It's washed Wednesday and left dry until the following Monday we wean again.
Very good. Roy, you mentioned using gut enhancers, the prebiotics, probiotics, the long chain fatty acids, and so on. Have you looked at the cost of those, the cost of including those versus the cost of antibiotics or zinc?
Yeah, we did look at that, right? And it works out the right side of it. So the inclusions there that would be sort of gut enhancers were coming in around about €45. Zinc, I think, was €7. And antibiotics, when you took in Starbucks and CTC, you were up to the 45, 50 euros. So definitely, there's a little saving, but not massive.
Yeah. Another question here: Have either of you noticed the slowing down in pigs getting to the factory? As in longer time to get to the factory, slower to get to the weights, the target weights, and things like that, as a result of being antibiotic free since you removed antibiotics and zinc?
I haven't. No, I haven't seen any. No, can't say. In fact, if anything, I saw an increase in growth rates in the early stages, and that goes on right the way through. So I didn't see any decrease. But I'm usually no.
Eugene?
So we would be the same. We wouldn't have seen a decrease in weights or longer time going to factory. If anything, with all the extra pigs being weaned with the last couple of months, like with the last 5 months, like it's shot up time going to the factory.
Yeah. And while you're talking to Eugene, you might mention anything on your current vaccination program. What are you vaccinating for? Did you make any changes as a result of withdrawing the antibiotics? Was there more vaccines?
We're vaccinating for pneumonia, we're vaccinating for wasting, and we were vaccinating for palls. We've currently at the moment stopped that. Looking at vaccinating for the ileitis, but the cost is very prohibitive to do that. It's very expensive, the ileitis vaccine.
Okay.
It's cost prohibitive at the moment, yes.
And Roy, did you make any changes?
No, I made no changes at all because I didn't really need to, because I didn't have to, but I just kept the so they get a dose on weaning, and so I didn't make any changes. Didn't need to, luckily.
Okay. And what about you mentioned there at the end of the video, there was a erysipelas. How are you dealing with that, or have you gotten over that hump now?
Look, yeah, well, I mean, when you get a sort of dose of erysipelas, and it seems to be in certain pens, so you go in and you have to either give a quick acting antibiotic, to the penicillin, to the animals affected, or better still, just go and do the whole pen. And it's a 7-day withdrawal period, so it wasn't too onerous to do, but it was, again, it's one of these horrible things that they get the fever, and you can see them straight away. Easy spotted, easy got, and it's, again, like the other things, it has diminished, and it's now back down to next to nothing, hardly there at all. We had another one, I think, a couple of days ago, but it seems to have run its course. But it got into the stage where either joints were affected, and we did some postmortems, and you can see the lesions on the heart valves, and that was when it was horrible. So you'd find these pigs that just couldn't get enough blood through the system because their heart valves were coated in a sort of polyps, if you like. So,
okay.
Gone and going, I hope.
Good. Fingers crossed. Have either of you noticed any less tail biting problems with improved gut health?
Didn't have tail biting as a problem anyhow. But then I don't do long tails, and I don't really want to go down long tail route. My housing certainly wouldn't like it, if you like. I've got too many other things. There's too many factors, if you like, involved in this. It's multifactorial. So I didn't see any increase or decrease because I didn't have it, and it certainly hasn't increased.
Yeah. I suppose the tales were dealt with on another night, and maybe we haven't heard the end of it. It's going to continue, so maybe for another agenda, another night. There's a question here on, where is it? Lost it. Yeah, have it now. Yeah, you mentioned it right at the end of your presentation there as well about, you know, big efforts being made by farmers to comply with these regulations. The two of you as prime examples of that. Have either of you had any discussions with your customers for your meat, i.e. the processors, in terms of any sort of a margin or compensation for antibiotic free? And if so, how did you get on? If not, you know, what can we do to make the processors, I suppose, and the retailers play their part too, that, you know, that the farmer's doing his bit, but yeah, it comes at a cost.
It is. It's coming across all things, and I know James Brady today or yesterday was mentioned it. You know, there's going to be no added benefit for going freedom, or should we say, by going to long tails. There won't be any financial incentive whatsoever. You just have to do it. And this is the rather difficult thing, that no matter what rules and regulations are thrown at us, we seem to be expected to do them without there being a full planned approach as to where the costs are going to be picked up by. We tend to be left carrying the can ourselves. So any move we can do at our level. Now, I haven't been to the factory to ask them if they're going to give me more for antibiotic, you know, freedom. I'm meant to be antibiotic free, and that's going to be mandatory by next February. So that, you know, everybody has to be on the same thing then. So it's a difficult one, but we do need to start thinking this whole thing through, because there's going to be added costs on from a lot of other sources as well are coming down the tracks at us, and there doesn't seem to be a joined up approach as to who's going to pay for it. We're just expected to carry the can.
Mm-hmm. Eugene, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, the same here, because when we started this first, basically where all this started first, which antibiotic free, we were in America at one stage, and into a big supermarket down, and there was the antibiotic raised pork and non-raised pork, and the antibiotic free pork was $1 a pound there, and we said, man, why can't we bring it home? But the factories weren't interested. There was no processor interested in going there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, seems to be the case across the board. So, okay, I think we've run the course of our questions. So, if anybody else has anything else, you can put it in through the Q&A there before we wind up. But I'm just going to hand back over to Thomas now if he wants to say anything by way of close. If any other last-minute questions come in, I'll keep an eye on it here. Over to you, Thomas.
Thanks, Ciaran.
Just come in there, Ciaran.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're okay, Ciaran. Just how well positioned are other European countries when it comes to the removal of zinc oxide, just for 2022?
Who do you want to answer that?
Well, I suppose it's more aimed at Ciaran, because I suppose he might be in contact with other...
Yeah, I would say they're at various stages, but they're no different to ourselves. There would be a good bit of research done in Denmark and the Netherlands on it. It's similar to projects we're currently involved in ourselves. But I suppose, and that's where this legislation on the ban on zinc oxide emanated from. I mean, the idea behind it is that zinc is a heavy metal, so they want to reduce the amount of heavy metals that are going out in slurry on the land. And a country like Ireland, where the pigs per acre or pigs per hectare are so few and far between, compared to countries like the Netherlands, we're on a very uneven playing. But like something similar to what Roy said there about the prebiotics, inclusion of probiotics, and those long chain fatty acids and things like that, blends of acids as well that would be going into diets. But they haven't, in the trial work they've done, they haven't found any one silver bullet that's going to replace zinc oxide. Nothing is going to replace zinc oxide in terms of its efficacy in preventing diarrhea and scar problems. But it does seem that it will be a combination of a few of those type things, on top of obviously good health, hygiene and biosecurity on the farm. It will be a combination of some additives and reducing crude protein levels in diets and things like that to help us get over that transition period and adjust to it.
Okay, thanks, Ciaran. Just one very last quick question again for yourself, Ciaran. I know that you're doing a lot of research there around this topic. Just looking at other kind of countries as well across Europe, what sort of approach are they taking as well And are there any kind of early findings from any research kind of areas that they may have undertaken as well?
Yeah, again, it's kind of nearly in my last answer there. You're looking at blended acids and things like that. But if you go too high endemic, it can make the feed unpalatable and maybe reduce intakes. The polar opposite of what Roy has found, you know, with his changed diets. So it's going to be combinations of that, and that's what the research is showing. The Danes had a webinar there last year, and that was their finding. It was going to be combinations of acids that were going to be probably the main, I won't call them replacement, but the main issue to deal with the ban on zinc oxide. And I suppose the focus is always going to be on the health and hygiene, so making sure our biosecurity is right. And there's a number of reasons for doing that, not least the ban on zinc oxide. So it's that, and it's the management of the pigs. So looking at the work we're doing in Moore Park, there's a couple of projects. Pig Nutri-Strats is a project there. It's been led by Peter Lawler, and that's looking at a whole range of areas, looking at everything from the sow diet during pregnancy, during lactation, the different types of creep diets, supplemental milk in the farrowing house and in the weaner house, in the first stage weaner, and trying different ranges of those, and even down to things like stocking rates and all that. So that research that will be carried out in Moore Park, we'll hopefully have results in the near future on that we'll be able to provide to you through our research dissemination days and conferences.
Okay, thanks, Ciaran, for that. I think that kind of concludes all the questions within this section. So I suppose on behalf of the Irish Pig Health Society Committee, I would just like to thank all the sponsors, the speakers, and the people who attended the different webinars. And hopefully we can see each other in person at next year's symposium. So without further ado, good luck.